There is a moment that happens to every man who enters El Salvador's CECOT prison. It is the moment when the steel door closes behind him, and he realizes that his name no longer matters. His family no longer matters. His life before this moment no longer matters. Because he has just entered a place where men are not sentenced to time, they are sentenced to disappearance. 40,000 men are currently locked inside CECOT. Most of them have not been convicted of any crime. Most of them have never seen a lawyer. Most of them have no release date because the legal system that put them there has decided that trials take too long and evidence is not required when the entire country is at war. The war is against gangs. And the weapon is a building with no windows, no programs, no hope, and no end. What you are about to see is not a prison system. It is a government deciding that some people should be erased from society while their hearts are still beating. And the most disturbing part is that 90% of El Salvador supports it. Most documentaries will not tell you what I am about to tell you because the politics are too divisive and the human cost is too uncomfortable. But if you are tired of surface-level reporting, if you want investigations that go into the places cameras are not allowed and ask the questions most people avoid, subscribe right now. Because this story does not have a clean ending. It has only choices. And you are going to have to decide which choice you would make if you were in charge. Let me show you why. El Salvador is smaller than the state of Massachusetts. 6 million people. And for 3 decades it was controlled not by the government but by 2 gangs. MS-13 and Barrio 18. These were not street gangs in the American sense. These were paramilitary organizations that controlled entire cities, collected taxes from businesses, recruited children as young as 10, and murdered anyone who refused to comply. At the peak of the violence, El Salvador had one of the highest homicide rates in the world. 61 murders per 100,000 people. For comparison, the murder rate in the United States is about 6 per 100,000. In El Salvador, gang members could kill you in broad daylight, and no witness would testify because testifying meant your entire family would be killed next. Police were outgunned. Prisons were overcrowded and corrupt. Gang leaders ran operations from inside their cells using smuggled phones. The previous government tried negotiating with the gangs. They tried truces. They tried social programs. And while the programs were running, the gangs were recruiting, extorting, and killing. Nothing worked. And in 2019, the country elected a president who promised to end the violence permanently. His name is Nayib Bukele. And his plan was not reform. His plan was elimination. March 27, 2022. 87 people were murdered across El Salvador in a single weekend. It was the deadliest 48 hours in the country's modern history. The next day, President Bukele declared a state of exception. That is a legal term that means the Constitution is suspended. Your right to a lawyer? Suspended. Your right to know why you are being arrested? Suspended. Your right to a trial within a reasonable time frame? Suspended. The police and military were given one directive. Arrest everyone connected to MS-13 or Barrio 18. Use tattoos as evidence. Use neighborhood as evidence. Use anonymous tips as evidence. Use anything. Just get them off the streets. What followed was the largest mass arrest operation in the Western Hemisphere outside of wartime. 75,000 people arrested in 2 years. That is more than 1% of the entire population. And most of them were not arrested because police caught them committing a crime. They were arrested because someone said they were in a gang, or because they had tattoos, or because they lived in the wrong neighborhood and could not prove they were innocent. In most legal systems, the government has to prove you are guilty. In El Salvador, under the state of exception, you have to prove you are innocent. And if you cannot, you go to CECOT. The buses arrive at night. The prisoners are shackled at the wrists and ankles. Their heads are forced down by guards so they cannot see where they are going or how many others are on the bus with them. When the bus stops and the door opens, they are pulled out onto concrete and walked in a line toward a building that has no visible windows from the outside. Inside, every prisoner goes through the same process. Stripped completely naked. Head shaved with clippers. Full body cavity search conducted by guards wearing gloves and using methods designed to humiliate as much as to search. No one explains what is happening. No one tells them how long they will be here. They are given a white uniform. No shoes. Prisoners at CECOT do not wear shoes. They will walk on concrete barefoot for the rest of their sentence, however long that sentence is, which in most cases is never defined because they were never sentenced by a judge. They were sentenced by an executive order. And then the door closes. The steel door that weighs hundreds of pounds and locks from the outside with bolts as thick as a man's wrist. And the prisoner is now inside the place the government calls the Center for the Confinement of Terrorism, but that human rights organizations are calling something much darker. The cells at CECOT are 100 square meters. That is about the size of a small two-bedroom apartment. They were designed to hold 80 men. Most of them hold between 150 and 200. The men sleep on metal bunk beds welded together and stacked 4 levels high. The beds are so close together that you cannot sit up on the lower bunks without hitting the bunk above you. There are no mattresses. There are thin mats on some of the beds. On others there is just metal. The cell has a communal bathroom. Toilets with no stalls. No privacy. Everything you do in front of 150 other men. The smell inside the cells is something that former guards describe as unforgettable. Human waste, sweat, and the particular thick smell of too many bodies in too little space with no ventilation. There are no windows. There is no natural light. The only light comes from fluorescent bulbs in the ceiling that never turn off. You sleep in full brightness. You wake in full brightness. You lose track of time because there is no sunrise to mark the day and no sunset to end it. There is only the light and the heat and the men packed so tightly that you can hear every breath, every movement, every nightmare of the men on the bunks around you. There is no schedule at CECOT in the traditional sense. Prisoners do not have jobs. They do not have classes. They do not have programs. They do not go outside. Prisoners at CECOT have not seen sunlight since the day they arrived. Some of them have been inside for over 2 years now. 2 years without seeing the sky. The day is marked only by meals. Breakfast is delivered through a slot in the door. Beans, rice, a piece of bread. Lunch is the same. Dinner is the same. The food is calculated to meet the minimum caloric requirements to keep a human body alive. It is not designed to taste good. It is designed to be cheap and sufficient. After eating, there is nothing to do. No books. No television. No radio. No communication with the outside world. No phone calls. No letters. No visits. Families do not know which cell block their sons or brothers or fathers are in. Families do not know if they are alive. Some prisoners sit on their bunks and stare at the wall for hours. Some talk quietly to the men near them. Some pray. Some have stopped doing anything at all. They lie on their bunks with their eyes open and do not move unless forced to by guards. We are about to go deeper into what this kind of confinement does to the human mind and why some prisoners are beginning to break in ways that even hardened gang members did not expect. If you want the investigations that other channels will not do because they are too controversial or too uncomfortable, subscribe now. Because the next section is where this story stops being about policy and starts being about what happens to a human soul under these conditions. Psychologists who study extreme confinement describe a pattern that happens to almost everyone subjected to these conditions. In the first 2 weeks, the prisoner experiences shock and denial. This cannot be real. This will not last. Someone will come. In the first 2 months, anxiety becomes constant. Hypervigilance. Inability to sleep even though there is nothing to do but sleep. Panic attacks. In the first 6 months, depression sets in. Deep, clinical, treatment-resistant depression. And at CECOT there is no treatment. There are no psychologists. There are no medications. In the first year, some prisoners begin experiencing hallucinations. They see things that are not there. They hear voices. They lose the ability to distinguish between memory and present reality. After a year, for some prisoners, the personality begins to fragment. They stop responding when spoken to. They stop eating unless forced. They rock back and forth for hours. They scratch at the walls. They speak to people who are not there. Guards have reported finding prisoners in catatonic states, unresponsive to any external stimulus, eyes open but no one inside anymore. The medical term for this is extreme psychological torture. The term the guards use is simpler. They call it breaking. And at CECOT, men are breaking at a rate that has never been documented in any other prison system in the modern world. Because no other prison system has tried to do what El Salvador is doing. No other government has locked this many people in conditions this extreme for this long with no plan for release and no mental health intervention. CECOT was designed to separate gang members by affiliation. MS-13 in one section. Barrio 18 in another. The theory was that separation would prevent violence. But what the architects of CECOT did not account for is that gang structure is not physical. It is psychological. Inside the MS-13 cell blocks, the hierarchy still exists. Shot callers, the high-ranking leaders, still give orders. They give orders using hand signals that guards do not understand. They give orders using coded language during the brief moments when cell doors are open for inspections. They give orders by tapping on walls and patterns that communicate across cells. The younger gang members still follow those orders because the alternative is worse. Even inside CECOT, even in a place with no weapons and no privacy and constant surveillance, the gangs have found ways to enforce discipline. A man who disobeys can be isolated socially. He can be denied food by the other prisoners. He can be attacked during the brief moments when guards are not watching. And because the cells are so overcrowded and the guards are so outnumbered, violence happens. It happens quietly. It happens quickly. And it is often not discovered until someone is already dead. The government of El Salvador releases footage of CECOT that shows order. Prisoners sitting calmly. Guards in control. The message is that the gangs have been neutralized. But that footage is carefully selected. What the government does not release is the number of prisoners who have died inside CECOT since it opened. Independent journalists have tried to get that number. The government has refused to provide it. What we know comes from leaked reports and from families who have received death notifications with no explanation. Prisoners are dying from medical neglect. Men with diabetes, asthma, heart conditions are not receiving treatment because CECOT does not have a functional medical facility. Prisoners are dying from infections that could be treated with basic antibiotics if anyone cared to treat them. Prisoners are dying from violence. Inmates are killing each other using improvised weapons made from torn metal, from sharpened plastic, from anything that can puncture or cut. And some prisoners, according to reports that have been leaked by correctional staff who are disturbed by what they are witnessing, are dying from suicide. Men who decide that non-existence is preferable to existence under these conditions. The bodies are removed quickly. Families are notified with a single sentence. Your son is dead. No details. No ability to see the body. No independent autopsy. And the official record stays clean because the deaths are classified as natural or accidental or sometimes not classified at all. His name is Cristian. He is 19 years old. He was arrested while walking to work at a car wash in San Salvador. He has no gang tattoos. He has no criminal record. He has never been charged with a crime. He was arrested because a neighbor, whose identity was never revealed to him, told police that Cristian was affiliated with MS-13. That is all it took. An anonymous accusation. Cristian has been inside CECOT for 26 months. He has not been allowed to speak to a lawyer. He has not been allowed to call his mother. His mother has been to CECOT 11 times requesting information about her son. She has been turned away every time. She does not know if he is alive. She does not know what cell block he is in. She does not know when or if he will ever be released. And Cristian is not unique. Human rights organizations estimate that between 5 and 15% of the prisoners inside CECOT are not gang members. They are people who were arrested based on accusations or tattoos from their teenage years that they got before they understood what they meant, or simply because they lived in a gang-controlled neighborhood and could not prove they were not involved. Thousands of people locked in CECOT, without trial, without evidence, without any legal mechanism to challenge their detention. And the government's response when asked about these cases is always the same. Mistakes are an acceptable cost of winning the war. Stop for a moment and answer this question honestly. If you were Cristian's mother, and your innocent 19-year-old son was locked inside CECOT with no trial and no way to contact you, and you had no legal options and no government official would listen to you, what would you do? Would you accept it as necessary collateral damage in a war against gangs? Would you demand his release even knowing it might mean releasing guilty people too? Would you bind the system down? Would you leave the country? What would you actually do? Comment your answer below. Because this is not a hypothetical exercise for thousands of families in El Salvador right now. This is their reality. And your answer reveals what you actually believe about justice versus safety. We are halfway through this investigation, and what comes next is the part that divides everyone who watches it. Because the next section is about results. About whether CECOT is actually working. About whether the drop in murder rates justifies the human cost. And about whether you can support a system that saves thousands of lives outside the prison while destroying thousands of lives inside it. If you want the full story without the sanitized version, subscribe now. This is about to get more complicated. Here are the facts. In 2021, before CECOT opened and before the state of exception began, El Salvador recorded over 3,800 homicides. In 2023, after CECOT had been operating for a full year, the country recorded fewer than 400 homicides. That is a 90% reduction. 90%. Businesses that were paying thousands of dollars a month in extortion to gangs are no longer paying. Families that kept their children inside after dark because the streets were controlled by armed gang members are now letting their children play outside. Public buses that were regularly stopped and robbed by gangs are running without incident. Neighborhoods that were war zones 2 years ago are now safe enough that tourists are visiting them. The economy is growing. Foreign investment is increasing. And President Bukele's approval rating is over 90%. The people of El Salvador, by every available measure, support what is happening at CECOT. Not despite the human rights violations. Not in ignorance of the conditions. They support it because it worked. Because their lives are objectively better. Because they can leave their houses without fear of being killed. And that creates the most uncomfortable question in this entire story. If you were the president of El Salvador in 2022, and every previous attempt to stop gang violence had failed, and 60 people per 100,000 were being murdered every year, and children were being recruited into gangs, and businesses were being extorted into bankruptcy, and the police could not protect anyone, and the justice system was too slow and too corrupt to function, what would you have done? Would you have continued with programs that were not working while people continued dying? Would you have negotiated with organizations that had murdered thousands of your citizens? Or would you have built CECOT? Would you have suspended constitutional rights? Would you have arrested 75,000 people, knowing that some of them would be innocent, if it meant saving the lives of thousands of others? This is not a rhetorical question. This is the question that every leader of every country dealing with violence at this scale has to answer. And there is no answer that does not result in people dying. The only question is which people and how many. And whether you believe the people inside CECOT matter as much as the people outside it. And whether your answer changes depending on whether you are one of the people who is safer now or one of the people locked inside. Every Thursday, a group of women gathers outside the main government building in San Salvador. They are mothers. Mothers of men who were arrested under the state of exception and sent to CECOT. They hold photographs of their sons. They hold signs demanding information. Demanding trials. Demanding anything. The police stand nearby and watch them. The government officials walk past them without stopping. The women have been gathering every Thursday for over a year. Some of them have been coming for 2 years. They do not know if their sons are alive. They do not know if their sons are being tortured. They do not know if their sons will ever come home. And the country walks past them because the country is safer now. Because the murder rate is down. Because people can go to work without fear. And the cost of that safety is standing outside the government building holding a photograph and asking a question that no one will answer. Where is my son? Is he alive? Can I see him? Can he see a lawyer? When will there be a trial? Please. Just tell me if he is alive. Honduras announced in 2023 that it will build a prison modeled on CECOT. Guatemala is considering it. Mexico is watching closely. If CECOT is judged to be a success, if the international community accepts that mass incarceration without trial is a valid response to gang violence, then this model will spread. We are looking at a potential future where tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people across Latin America are locked in facilities like CECOT without ever being convicted of a crime. The argument in favor is that it works. The argument against is that it is a mass human rights violation that future generations will judge the way we judge other mass atrocities. And the decision about which argument wins is being made right now. by governments, by international organizations, by people like you who watch videos like this and decide whether what they are seeing is justice or whether it is something that should be stopped before it becomes normal. Your opinion matters, not because you live in El Salvador, but because if this becomes the accepted model, it will not stay in El Salvador. Here is the second question I need you to answer. If your country, the country you live in right now, was experiencing the level of violence that El Salvador experienced, and your government proposed building a prison like CECOT and suspending constitutional rights to arrest suspected criminals without trial, would you support it? Not in theory, not as a thought experiment. If it was your streets, your neighborhood, your children at risk, and CECOT was a proposed solution, would you say yes? Or would you say no even if it meant the violence continued? And if you say no, what would you propose instead that would actually work? Comment below. And be specific. Because it is easy to criticize from a distance. It is much harder to propose an alternative that would save lives without violating rights. If you have one, tell me what it is. CECOT has been open for less than 3 years. The long-term effects are still unknown. What happens to 40,000 men after 5 years of no sunlight? After 10 years? After 20? What happens to their brains? What happens to their bodies? What happens to their capacity to function as human beings if they are ever released? No one knows because no prison system has ever attempted this before at this scale. This is an experiment. An experiment in human endurance. An experiment in social control. An experiment in whether a democracy can suspend its own principles temporarily in a crisis and then return to those principles after the crisis is over. Or whether the suspension becomes permanent. Whether the exception becomes the rule. Whether what started as an emergency measure becomes the standard operating procedure. And whether 20 years from now, we'll look back at CECOT as the thing that saved El Salvador or as the thing that revealed how quickly a society can justify doing anything to anyone if they are frightened enough. There is no clean answer to what is happening at CECOT. Anyone who tells you there is a clean answer is lying or has not looked closely enough. If you focus only on the human rights violations, the lack of trials, the conditions inside the cells, the innocent people locked up without recourse, then CECOT is indefensible. It is torture. It is illegal under international law. It should be shut down immediately. But if you focus only on the results, the 90% drop in homicides, the thousands of lives saved, the families who can now live without fear, the children who can go to school safely, then CECOT is the only thing that worked after decades of failure. Both of those perspectives are true simultaneously. And the fact that they are both true is what makes this so impossible to resolve. Because you cannot dismiss the suffering inside CECOT without dismissing the suffering that CECOT ended outside its walls. And you cannot celebrate the safety CECOT created without acknowledging the human cost of creating it. And anyone who tells you they have figured out how to balance those two things perfectly is lying to you or to themselves. One of the most disturbing aspects of CECOT is that it operates on the assumption that the men inside cannot be redeemed, that gang members cannot change, that once you have committed certain acts or joined certain organizations, you have forfeited your right to a future. There are no rehabilitation programs at CECOT because rehabilitation implies the possibility of release. There is no education. There is no job training. There is no therapy. There is only containment. Storage, warehousing of human beings until they die. And maybe that assumption is correct. Maybe some people cannot be rehabilitated. Maybe some people are so damaged or so dangerous that the only ethical option is to remove them from society permanently. But the problem is that CECOT makes that decision without ever determining who actually falls into that category. It applies the same permanent sentence to everyone. To the gang leader who ordered 50 murders and to the 19-year-old who got arrested because his neighbor made an accusation. To the hardened killer and to the person who might have been capable of change if anyone had bothered to find out. If this story disturbs you, if it makes you angry, if it makes you want to do something, here is what you can actually do. You can support organizations that are documenting what is happening inside CECOT. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. They are trying to get access to the facility. They are trying to get the death toll. They are trying to represent the people who have no lawyers. You can pressure your own government to make aid to El Salvador conditional on human rights improvements. You can amplify the voices of the families who are demanding information about their missing sons. And you can have this conversation. You can show this video to people who think there are easy answers to gang violence. You can ask them the questions this video asked you. You can make them sit with the discomfort of realizing that both supporting CECOT and opposing it result in people dying. Because the only way this changes is if enough people understand what is actually happening and demand something better than the choice between mass incarceration without trial and unchecked gang violence. If this investigation changed how you think about justice, about safety, about the choices societies make when they are desperate, then subscribe right now. Because this is what we do. We go into the systems that other documentaries avoid because they are too messy or too controversial. We do not tell you what to think. We show you what is happening and trust you to be intelligent enough to form your own conclusions. Subscribe. Join a community that believes uncomfortable truths matter more than comfortable lies. Right now, 40,000 men are sitting in cells at CECOT. They are sitting in cells with no windows and no hope and no idea if anyone outside remembers they exist. Some of them are murderers. Some of them ordered the deaths of dozens of people. Some of them terrorized entire neighborhoods. And some of them are innocent. Some of them were arrested by mistake. Some of them were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And all of them are being treated exactly the same. All of them are forgotten. Because that is what CECOT was designed to do. Not to rehabilitate. Not to punish in the traditional sense. But to make people disappear while they are still breathing. To create a form of death that does not technically count as death. To answer the question of what to do with people who have committed terrible harm by deciding that the answer is to stop thinking about them entirely. And whether that is justice or whether that is something we will regret depends entirely on which side of the wall you are standing on when you answer the question. I am going to leave you with one final question, and I need you to answer it in the comments. Imagine you are locked inside CECOT right now. You have been there for 2 years. You have never been charged with a crime. You have never seen a lawyer. You have no contact with your family. You do not know if you will ever leave. And you have 2 options. You can accept that this is your life now and find a way to survive psychologically. Or you can resist knowing that resistance will likely get you killed or isolated further. What do you do? How do you survive? And at what point do you give up? Answer honestly. Because 40,000 men are answering that question every single day.